Good move.
So it looks like it's 4:06. I know there are a few others we're expecting who will join in. Um, but in some ways, I feel like we do have a kind of limited time and, as always, a full agenda. So I think we should just start, and hopefully folks can join in the conversation. Does that sound agreeable to everyone?
Yes.
Thumbs up. Agree. Thank you. Our new kind of virtual thing. So I guess, we'll start by welcoming everyone. It's great to see you all. Thank you for making the time out of your day, for joining in, both to the youth board members and the youth committee members. It's true to say that the last time we met, the world has changed quite significantly in so many ways. And so honestly, I think our meeting could be a 3-hour one to fully debrief, but we're not gonna do that today because we all know 4 o'clock, we're all zoomed out, WebEx out, or whatever platform it is that we've all been using in this new reality. But I have to say, we all know New York City is forever changed since this pandemic hit, where we have lost 24,000 people statewide, with the bulk of those coming from New York City. I know many of us here have been directly impacted, and certainly impacted just being in this city that is holding so much trauma right now. I know you've all seen and experienced that while the virus itself didn't discriminate, systemic inequities have ensured that the impacts of the virus have been disproportionately concentrated in Black and Brown communities, in the same communities that have been suffering for decades from divestment and lack of support services. It's been pretty tragic. We've also seen our elders have been particularly hard hit by the pandemic, with comprising over 60% of the fatalities. And there's a lot of work to be done on that front, a lot of questions to be asked around why nursing homes weren't prepared, or why they were given immunity. And with this pandemic, we see the economic fallout, where we're still assessing the impacts, and it's forcing us to make some real decisions around what we truly value in this city. And we see those negotiations happening right now, and we'll talk more about it later. And lastly, what we also see and what we've experienced is that systemic racism and inequities have always existed. And on May 25th, we all watched as cops murdered a Black man named George Floyd, that ignited protests around the country in New York City. And while uniquely heinous crime, what we know is time and time again, Black men, Black people in this country have been brutally murdered by unaccountable police force. I proudly stand with the Black community throughout the country and in New York City to demand justice, equality, and human dignity. These have really been trying times, and it demands all of us to be more vigilant, to be more active, and to lean into committed to being anti-racist and not allowing it. We are tired and we are demanding real change. And with that, I just want to read the names of some of the Black lives that we have lost to police violence. And with each name, I hope that you each can reaffirm your own commitment to the joy and liberation of Black people. Breonna Taylor, Tony McDade, George Floyd, Ahmaud Arbery, Delron Small, Elvin Diaz, Amadou Diallo, Ramarley Graham, Anthony Baez, Eric Garner, Jason Tirado, Mohammed Ba, Chantel David, Kamani Gray, Anthony Rosario, and so many more. Thank you. So now before we turn it over to the commissioner. Given the time that has, I'm sorry, my heart is beating so fast with each name. It breaks over and over again. So before we turn it over to the commissioner, I'd love for us to go around and check in with each other around how you're doing during this time, to give each of us a moment to check in before we jump into the business of the board. That gets done on, I guess maybe we can, each person can call somebody to pass it to after they're done. So if you would introduce yourself and just tell us how you're doing in this time before we jump into the agenda as we laid it out. So thank you for indulging me and taking all that time. On my mind and in my heart, and I think with that, I will pass it to Lucy.
Thank you, Alexa. That was very moving. And this has been such a tough time. Although I feel encouraged, maybe I shouldn't, but I do feel encouraged by all the young people involved in the protests. You know, for myself, I'm very fortunate. I live in a big apartment. I live near Central Park, so it has not been. I have not been burdened. But I think about the kids in particular. I mean, my starting with my grandkids, but obviously lots of children. Particularly those between age 10 and 20 have just lost a part of their life that they can never retrieve, and I think that is really difficult. And then, but again, certainly my grandchildren are all with their parents are protesting. I think it's a way of finding some shape or form to the sense of disengagement. I hope it is, at least. With that, I'll pass it to Nancy.
Okay. Oh, there's some echo. There's some real echo. Can you hear me?
Yes, but I can hear the echo too.
Oh, I don't know where it's coming from.
Two devices connected, because if you have two devices, you're going to get a feed off of them, and that's what's going to cause an echo.
I only have one device.
The secondary device that's connected to your name, like your name is popping up twice. I don't know where it is, but it appears as though there's two devices under your name, and that's what's giving you that feedback.
I logged in. I don't know what to do about it, Jeanette. Okay. All right.
Nancy, let's figure out on the tech issue what's happening with you, and maybe we'll pass it on to Tom. Would you like to?
Maybe I'll leave the meeting and come back in.
Okay, can you hear me? Can you hear me?
Yes, Tom, we can hear you. Yeah, Tom, we can hear you.
No, okay. How's that?
Clearly, yes.
I keep
Much
clicking
better.
the button off and on. Anyway, I'm very fortunate also because my home is up in Putnam County, which is just north of Westchester. So I'm in a comfortable setting with a big yard, and and I'm not doing 4 hours of commuting a day. So the virus, not having to be in the city and working from home has not been difficult for me. But clearly, it's been a very challenging time, and at the department, it's an extremely stressful time, and trying to figure out how to proceed safely. And I know, I don't know if any of you might have known a man named Dominic Brancato, but he was the founder of a very important social service agency on Staten Island, and he passed away from the virus, which was shocking news. So, I mean, I think it's touched all of us. And I think also while there's been less activity up here in my community, I'm certainly in touch with the things that are going on in the city and the impact that it's happening. And I think it does have a big, powerful impact. And I'm glad to see as many people standing up and being concerned about these horrible things which have been going on for so long, and which I can say that are hidden to so many people from the white middle class who don't really, up until recent times, really had no idea what was going on. And so it's wonderful that now there's more activity that people can't avoid.
Alexa, I think, oh,
How about if I pass it to Erica? Is Erica here?
Hey, so similarly, I'm pretty used to Zoom and I forgot how to unmute myself for a moment. Yeah, I would definitely echo that it's been a very heavy past few months. So I've been finishing up my last semester in grad school. I'm still out in Princeton, and we just had a virtual commencement last weekend. So it was strange being away from all my family who's in New York City, and just feeling that heaviness, and the heaviness of the past few weeks has just been really immense. But I would also echo what Lucy said, in that it's been inspiring too, to see how people have really rallied. So we actually had some protests on campus over here, which were really inspiring and just wonderful to be a part of. And so yeah, it's just been a lot of heavy emotions, but I was inspired by that. And I will pass it on to Jeanette.
Hi. So thanks so much for passing that over. It has been an emotionally draining and exhausting several months that have been compounded within the last couple of weeks. And where I spent a lot of time last week where I felt like it was a fog, like this fog I just couldn't climb out of. I feel more energized now in the fact that I have to be more intentional with my words, with my actions, and how I show up. And I will not take any of that lightly. We have to be on the forefront of conversation. We have to back words with action. And that's where I am now, almost like trying to take a piece of that power back. Because I am born and raised in New York, specifically in Parksville, Brooklyn, and where I've seen this neighborhood change, and I've encountered moments of racism, etc. I used to feel that other people in other parts of the world lived in bubbles. Like, how did they not think about diversity? Why were they so racist, etc.? And what was eye-opening to me is that I have felt that I've been in a bubble. I have been protected by the diversity of New York City and the experiences I was able to obtain here through even public schools, etc. And that is not the reality. So I feel more intentional in my words and actions, how I have to show up, so we can actually shape tomorrow. We can't change the past. We don't forget it, but we have a responsibility to change what tomorrow looks like. That's kind of where I'm at. So I am going to pass it over to Charles.
I think what I'm surprised to hear myself say, because I'm not a New Yorker and I was born in Boston, but I've spent many, many years in New York, is I'm proud to be a New Yorker now. I think that what New York did, what the governor did, what the mayor did, and basically flattening the curve and teaching people what to do and saving lives, makes me very proud. The pandemic would have been enough, but what happened afterwards, I think is, and I think everyone has said it appropriately and emotionally, has made us all open our eyes and understand that things have to change. And I just have this feeling, a little drumbeat, that maybe things are changing, and maybe the terror in Washington is maybe ended because the people have risen. So I'm still proud to be a New Yorker and to participate in what's going on. And I don't know who's left. And the letters are too small for me to see. So if someone hasn't spoken, please speak.
How about Jackie?
Hey, Jackie, are you there? Jackie?
Yes.
Okay. Your mic is unmuted. You may give your part of the information. We are actually recouping and just finding out how you're handling with this new way we're living now with the COVID.
You hear me?
Yes.
Motion detected at the front door.
Oh, you can hear me.
Yes, Jackie, we can all hear you.
We can hear you, Jackie.
Okay, sorry. I have so many video platforms now on all my devices. It's kind of wearing me down. I think, for me, I've been struggling with not only the last month, but also with the more recent events where I feel like all the disparities and inequities that, that we've seen over and over again has not only become more apparent, but also accelerated. And I feel an urgency to really try to resolve and find ways to be not only more proactive, but more targeted, more intentional, more vocal, and even just more visible. I feel like I haven't been as visible as I could have. I can be, and I'm hoping as we ease into reopening that I will visibility and become much more vocal about what I think should be happening. So I'll pass it on to Jordana.
Hi, everyone. I apologize for coming in late. I actually was having a conversation at my work about kind of what are our next steps, and it's very much on our forefront of how we support our community. And that started with, what can we do to support our community when we all ended up going into quarantine, and how do we continue to support our community now, and both in this still virtual reality, and also with really the country and the world calling attention to the disparities and inequities that Black people have suffered for centuries here. I'm frustrated. I'm really angry. I'm frustrated on so many things, and as I try to figure out my role and my space to make some of that change, I get frustrated again. And one thing that I am trying to figure out is I do have certain places where I participate in, and so how can I change those places? And I think about us here and the budget cuts. Sorry, I'm going to just be on my soapbox for a minute, but I think of the budget cuts that hit us, hit this department, the DYCD, and I see people rallying right now about how to shift some of that budget back to us, and would love to see if there's ways that we can advocate to help with that, because what the DYCD does of supporting communities is so needed right now. And I think there's a moment where we can have a voice for that in a collective, thoughtful way. I'm not trying to burn everything down, but I do think that there is a responsibility that we have that we could possibly explore here, because I'm frustrated. I'm frustrated that over 30% of this budget was hit. And I know that other departments like the police were not, whereas like 1%. So I just feel like there's so much, and I feel frustrated every which way. So I turn to you guys to help me in this frustration. I don't know who all has, Nancy, you haven't had a chance. So Good
I think I fixed the problem. Sorry about that. Well, Jordana, that's well. First of all, Alexa, thank you for your words. Thank you for your words and thoughts at the beginning, because I think it's too easy for most of us to just fall into doing business as usual, and business as usual does not acknowledge and recognize, I think, what has been going on in our city. And so thank you for that. And Jordana, of course, that's a great segue. I mean, I have been so upset about the DYCD cuts since they were announced. Tried to do what I could behind the scenes. I think we have an obligation as a youth board to say something about that now. It is so, I emailed Alexa and Lucy on yesterday. I think it's so heartening for me to see that the protesters have taken up the cause. They're saying, shift some of the police money to DYCD and social services, which, some of us have been fighting this battle for like the last 40 years. Take the fire department overtime. You could fund all of DYCD with the fire department overtime. You could. I remember doing that analysis. So, I mean, I think this is a moment. People in the street are protesting to get more youth services. So I think we need to be articulate about that. So I'm actually hopeful that maybe some of this will change permanently. I've been around a long time. I don't know if it will, but I'm really hopeful that young people coming out in big numbers, that's what's going to change it. For me, I'm okay. I'm, really privileged. I lost my very, very beloved aunt in March, at the end of March, to COVID. She was in an assisted living. That was horrible, and remains very, very painful that she had to die alone, as so many older people did. But I'm privileged, and I know it. So that's all I have to say.
Anna?
Can you hear me now? George Holt?
We can hear you, George.
Okay, good. Yeah, I live in Teaneck, New Jersey, and of course, when COVID-19 happened, the last place in New Jersey you wanted to be was Teaneck, New Jersey. And so, in the middle of March, my wife and I and her daughter and her granddaughter, we went to our house outside. We have a house in Florida outside of Jacksonville, and I was down there for 10 weeks. Living the Florida life, but one of my neighbors texted me and said, "George, are you around? Your grass needs to be cut." So last week I came back to Teaneck to cut my grass. So I'm in my attic here in Teaneck. So I've been pretty lucky, although I've lost over a dozen friends. I lost 6 doctors as a result of this terrible set of situations. Someone said they live in a bubble, and I think I live in a bubble. When these police shootings started being recorded on a camera, I couldn't believe it myself. I'm 75 years old. I never really realized, living most of my life in Jersey, that the police had the right to shoot a black man in the back and not be found guilty or not even get upset about it. At 75 years old, of course, I am the last generation where that in America, racism, segregation was legal. Of course, when I was born, it was very, very legal, and white privilege was very, very expected and legal. And all of the whites who I went to school with in Somerville, New Jersey, and those who I grew up with were all the recipients of white racism, legal racism, and legal segregation. I remember once traveling in the South and I had to use a colored bathroom. There were times when I used to wonder why my father, whenever we drove in the South, would not stay in a hotel or motel. I didn't realize as a young boy that he couldn't stay in a motel or a hotel or use those restaurants. It was stressful when I had to go to that colored bathroom that was legal. And so as I see things happening now, I am happy to see the children and the grandchildren of that last generation, my generation of white kids who really don't think that race and racism should be continued. Long after it was no longer legal, of course, it's been practiced, and it's practiced today. And of course, that's the reason why these white police officers have the right to be on camera shooting black people in the back and never being nervous about it. I'm sure this has happened happens every single day in this country, and luckily now, as a result of these cameras, at least we have the opportunity now to film it. And I think that's the first step. And these protesters, this is the greatest protest since those protests of the 60s led by Martin Luther King and other black heroes. And it's these young white kids who are real heroes and sheroes who are working with blacks and Latinos and Chinese and immigrants and others who are changing this country. And it's a very, very proud moment that we're seeing. I knew when Donald Trump was elected that we would get a chance to really see America. And the truth is, we needed to be in a position where people could be honest. And Donald Trump did give people who were racist the opportunity to be honest. And we're seeing who we are, what we are, and the young people want to see something better. And I'm very optimistic that this is a turning point in America.
Thank you so much, George. Anna, would you like to go next?
First of all, my deepest condolence loved ones, and to those that are going through the painful situation of seeing relatives being impacted by COVID-19. A lot of change, very challenging. Our students, of course, as everyone knows, from teaching them on, at the regular, following the regular curriculum of teaching in the classrooms to going to virtual online has been extremely challenging, especially for the students. A good number of our students got sick. A good number of friends that I have, I lost them. They passed away due to COVID-19, the virus. It's been painful and, like I said, very challenging. And with the last situation of the social justice issues, has been really, really overwhelming. Seeing our students on the streets, demonstrating, seeing friends, family, everybody being impacted by this one way or the other, and knowing that everybody's looking at us, the entire world. It's not just the nation. I see videos of masses of people demonstrating in England, Italy, all over the world. And to think that it started here at home in the United States is very sad. And last, that part of the budgets, our budget being cut for our students, I think is, and if there's anything we can do to reinstate the budget, I think we should. I think we should advocate for that as much as we can. I myself, I spoke to a couple of legislators about that. Many of them are with us. I think that is a matter of going back to that budget. Rest, okay, I'm home with my daughter. Working from home, very challenging. Thank God we have technology, and I'm able to stay in contact with everyone that I need to be in contact with. And I'm sorry, Alexa, that you're going through all of this. I understand. That's what I want to say. I understand. That's
Thank
it.
you. Thank you so much, Anna. We have 3 more members left. Reggie, would you like to go next?
I'll be quick because we do have other folks and we do have other things to get to. I'll just say this. This has been a roller coaster for me. I've had very high highs and very low lows. 3 months ago to the day, my son was born, so that was a very high moment. So and that was actually our last meeting. So I think I was either coming back from, or the day after, I'm sorry. So it was 3 months ago, yes. Well, numerically, it was 3 months ago today. Last meeting was the day after he was born. And then everything that has happened in between has been just a sandwich of highs and lows that, just, it has been a roller coaster of a 3 months that, just sort of makes you wonder where we're going and what's happening in this world that we live in. So, the good is great, and I wouldn't trade it for anything. And the bad, I would gladly pass, but not wish upon anyone.
Thank you so much, Reggie. Congratulations on that new baby.
Thank you.
Nyla, would you like to go next?
Sure, I can. I joined late, but it sounds like you guys are just catching up to see. Okay. So I will say whether we're talking about COVID or whether we're talking about the more recent issues and the protests and everything that's happening around us, I would just characterize this time period as a moment of self-reflection, right? We don't have a choice but to sit back and ask ourselves, is there more we can do? And I felt that way, first just dealing with COVID, because my heart immediately went out to all of the kids. I feel like as adults, we find ways to bounce back. We'll figure it out. Some of us may have enjoyed being home for a little while, but I think both from a positive standpoint and a negative standpoint, I think thinking about what this means for kids, both, it's a great thing because they're probably, going to be more technologically advanced than the opportunities maybe that we grew up with. But also, this is a big adjustment to understand that kids aren't having graduations and proms and the things that people are used to. So the young people have been on my heart very heavy from the beginning. And also just trying to figure out and make sure that when all this is done, organizations like this, or even my dance school who serves 250 kids in Queens, who PPE doesn't work for us. And I'm in another alliance of a bunch of dance school owners, and collectively, we serve 1,000 kids in the community, and all of us are trying to figure out where are we going to be when this is over. And then to turn around and have the George Floyd situation happen, and understand that even as educators of dance, we use that as a platform to educate children about using their voice, about issues that are around them, about using dance as an outlet. And that has also been taken away from them. And we don't really know, because of COVID and social distancing, whether we're talking about, again, arts programs or programs that we all as the city, have affiliations with it. We don't know what the impact is going to be and where it's going to be. So my focus has really been on how do we make sure that young people come out of this and are the better for it. And at the same token, I'm very encouraged because they're really out there on the front lines on a lot of the protests and using their voice. I think, again, it's all the more important that we encourage the next generation to speak up. And that's the one thing, despite how bad all of this is, that has really encouraged me. The next generation is linking arms and sending a message. And I think that is a beautiful thing, and it's a wonderful thing. And like I said, it's caused me to self-assess, and in self-assessing, that broadens and expands to all of my networks. So I'm thinking about what that means for my job, thinking about what that means for every network that I'm a part of, when you have to say, okay, this is terrible. What can you do? How can you do more? And I said to someone, again, the generational divide is very interesting, because my highest and best use is going to be very different from a 22-year-old who can get on the front lines and use their voice and protest. And so in my self-assessment, again, I'm not saying I shouldn't go out and protest, but I'm saying I know I can bring more to the table. What does that look like? And so really trying to now, again, starting with my job, starting with, any affiliation I'm a part of, it's really trying to figure out what can we do. And right now, with everything being so crazy, with COVID still being what it is, with us still knowing that some laws and things need to change, the thing that's inspiring me the most is the way that young people are mobilizing in all of this. And I'm just encouraged that's going to be the thing to really, inspire what we do in the future.
Thank you so much, Nyla. I think last on the board, we have Liz.
I apologize to everyone. Thanks for unmuting. I apologize to everyone. I just got back to New York a couple of days ago to get fingerprinted for a new job, and I'm in my apartment for the first time and having some technical difficulties, so I'm just calling it on my phone. But I just wanted to thank everyone for their messages, both personal and broader thoughts on this situation. I actually, because everyone said so much, I don't have a lot to add. I think my biggest takeaway from all this, we have been touched. My son lost his soccer coach. We've lost parents at school to COVID. And for a while, we kept thinking we just want things to get back to normal. We want things to get back to normal. But then after the most recent events, we've completely turned a 180 on that. And we know that we can't get back to normal. We don't want to get back to normal. So I'm looking forward my new position. I left the Family Foundation that I was consulting for, and I took a position at UBS. I will be working in their family advisory and philanthropic services group, helping people channel their philanthropic dollars for good. So I think that's a big challenge, and I think there's a lot that we can do there to help. So I'm excited about that new way that I can hopefully contribute. And really, what I keep hearing over and over again is the hope is with the young people who have come together across every, race, color, gender, to take to the streets. And so what I'm really happy about is we as a board, can help. We're here to kind of represent them and be their advocates in terms of city engagement and how the city engages with them. So, I think hope is the last word that I have. And, I'm looking forward to working with the commissioner and DYCD and all of you to see how we can, be of assistance to our city's youth.
Thank you so much, Liz. So, I just want to thank you all for sharing where you are, how you're feeling, where you're sitting with. It is a heavy time. We couldn't jump into just business as usual because this is not usual time. And I can't agree with you more, Liz. We cannot go back to the old ways. We're going to live boldly and lean into kind of new ways of being. So I guess with that, I just, time check, we're at 4:45. We said we would conclude the meeting at 5. We certainly want to give the commissioner, would love to hear his report. There's so much to be updated on. Before we jump into that, I want to propose that perhaps we take maybe the discussion part of this meeting. I think we can dedicate the rest of it to the commissioner's report and asking some questions. And perhaps I'd like to propose a group we take the discussion part of the meeting, which is what now in this current environment for the youth board, where we should lean in and maybe set a separate date for that discussion for those who are interested in digging into that question.
Alexa,
Yeah.
Alexa, I thought this meeting was scheduled to go to 5:30.
We actually, we held 5:30, and then because honestly, Nancy, at my encouragement, I shortened it to 5 because I thought we'd all be kind of exhausted by a full day of meetings online. So I proposed shortening the meeting so that it didn't occur to me that we need to take the space that we need to take to check in with you. And that always takes longer. So I think I didn't fully appreciate that when I said, let's do an hour meeting and not an hour and a half. So
I mean, I was planning to go to 5:30. I don't know if others can do that if we need to.
that's a question on the table. Would others like to stay a little longer to get through some more discussion groups, or would we like to set up another time? So those who would like to stay a little can spend an extra half hour. Can you give me a thumbs up?
Thumbs up.
Okay. Okay, so it looks like the majority of us, and for those who can't, we will follow back up with you because I know this conversation is live and we all have lots of ideas around it. So for those who can't stay the full time, just feel free to, jump off when you can. I really appreciate your flexibility here. So with that, we turn it over to the commissioner. Thank you, Commissioner Chong.
Can you hear me? Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
First of all, let me say I'm glad to hear everyone is safe and healthy. I do want to express my condolences to those of you who've lost loved ones and family members. At DYCD, at least 2 of our staff members lost their parents. I think it's impossible for any of us to not know anyone who is not affected by the coronavirus. It's something that I think none of us in our lifetimes have expected. For me, personally, March, April, and May were hell. Okay, both my wife and I contracted the virus. I was more severely affected, and literally I was bedridden for 2 weeks, and it took me a good 6 weeks to get back to normal. I lost 13 pounds. It's very hard to gain 13 pounds back. And then as I was recovering is when I was informed about the budget cuts. Wasn't consulted, I was informed. And so I think our country is at an unprecedented time that I don't think our generation, and I mean generation, anyone who was born after World War II has faced. I mean, my wife and I were talking about this. Both our parents were born in 1913 and 1914. So they went through the 1918 pandemic, the Great Depression. My parents lived through the Civil War in China, and her parents lived through the bombings of London by the Nazis in World War II. So as many things that have happened over the last few years, 9/11, the Great Recession, nothing compares to what our parents went through. So I think, there's 2 things happening. There's a sense of anger, fear, anxiety that I think everyone is feeling. And the polling, there was a recent poll, I think it was the Wall Street Journal, NBC, said that 80% of the country says we're out of control. 80%. But I'm also heartened, and I think I agree with George, I'm also hopeful, because at the same time, there was another poll that said 76% of Americans, including 71% of white people, support the protests. So I think we are at an inflection point, and it's driven by several things. And everyone's talked about it, the role that young people are playing in this fight. On our social media, if you don't have a chance to check it out, we're constantly looking for stories of young people leading the efforts against racism in New York and around the country. And if you have stories, please share them with our social media and we can get the word out. So that to me is a source of optimism. The second reason I think I'm optimistic is that the dialogue has shifted. As Nancy has talked about, how do we prioritize government resources? And it's not just New York, it's LA, it's Massachusetts. Unfortunately, we're at a time when the economy is contracting and there's less government resources, but at least we've laid the foundation for a new paradigm that whether it's this mayor or the next mayor, people are now going to look at does the police department need as much money as it does? And maybe the best way to prevent crime is to keep young people engaged. So I'm hopeful on those two fronts that the dialogue has shifted, that young people are taking leadership roles. I saw this piece, it was an interview with John Lewis, Congressman John Lewis, and Gayle King pointed out that in the 60s, in the 50s and 60s civil rights movement, many of the leaders were young people. John Lewis was 22 when he founded SNCC. So, we may be seeing a new civil rights movement in this country. So that's sort of the big picture. On the budget, you know as much as I do, which is the mayor has made a pledge to shift funding from the police department. And actually, in today's press conference, he didn't talk about social services. He explicitly said from the police department to youth services. So I think he was a little more clearer. We've been pressing OMB for guidance. They don't have anything to share with us at this point. I'm hopeful that there'll be restorations. It'll be different because obviously we can't do the summer youth employment program the way we would normally do it because most of the businesses are still shut down. Summer camps can open now, but they're the state Office of Children and Families and Office of Children and Family Services just issued guidelines. So we're pouring through them to see what kind of activities could be allowed besides remote activities. Because the last thing any young person wants to do is sit at a computer in the summer. So what kind of recreational activities in person can the city do if we do get money? All those things are to be worked out. I'm worried about time. We have 3 weeks. We don't have money yet. And so it's hard. It's going to be a big lift to try to get our nonprofit partners to kind of turn 180 degrees from furloughing staff to bringing them back. So it'll be a rocky summer if we do get restorations. Things may not start as usual, and the kind of activities will be different. But I'm optimistic that we'll get some restorations. And I'll end with this. As somebody who's been an activist since my days at City College in 1974 and a community activist in Chinatown, I've been on the outside and I've been on the inside. And I will say that sometimes the people on the outside have a bigger megaphone. And that's clearly the case in what's happened in the last 2 weeks. And I'll end with that and take any questions.
Bill, I know when the cuts were first announced by the mayor, there were a lot of nonprofits at the time who said we could do some variation on summer youth employment. We could do some programming, summer programming. We have ideas about how to do that. And I'm wondering if DYCD has started meeting with folks or has met with folks, the nonprofits who run these programs traditionally, to find out what they will be able to do and how fast they'll be able to ramp up.
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay. So once we got the go-ahead, and that's important to point out because we were under clear instructions not to have any conversations because we didn't want to, I guess, raise unnecessary expectations. But once the mayor said that the city would work with the council on developing an alternative remote model, we've started engaging different people. I know a few weeks ago we had a good session with Teens Take Charge, who've been organizing an email campaign around this. And I don't know who else, but I know Daphne Montanez and the workforce team have been having video conferences with different people. And so I think we'll have a model. We don't have money yet. The only money that we have in our budget at this moment was about $22.5 million that the state put in its budget, which was part of the temporary assistance to needy families, the TANF money. We put in a request about a month ago for a waiver from the state to allow us to spend that money in this model, which is different, obviously, than the traditional SYP. We still have not gotten an answer. We've gotten informal responses saying no, but they haven't given us a formal no. And so we're working behind the scenes to pressure the state to release that money to us. Obviously, we don't know how much city money, because that will be part of the adopted budget process. And I know the mayor's fund is trying to raise private money, but I'm less optimistic about private money, because I think private money is competing with so many other big demands and needs, like food insecurity, like the needs of undocumented New Yorkers, that I'm not sure SYP, as important as a program it is, that the people can write $1 million check or write $1 million check. So my hope is the state money will come through, and that given the energy, I mean, I was watching MSNBC on Saturday, and Jumaane Williams was at one of the protests, and he talked about cutting the budget, cutting the police department budget, and giving it to the Department of Youth and Community Development. So we're clearly the focus of the advocacy, and as I said, people on the outside sometimes have a more powerful voice than those of us on the inside.
This is Lucy. So my question, one is, what is the waiver? What is the waiver for, and how could the city get around it if the state said no? Although I would think there'd be a lot of public opinion on the pressure on the state. And the second is to just sort of, echo a little bit of what Nancy was saying, that the not-for-profit.
So anyway, all that to say, I was on another call and somebody else called me, and I went to look at my schedule for tomorrow, and I was like, damn, like this is starting to get annoying.
Right. Someone mute themselves. Someone mute themselves. We're hearing another call.
Want to do work.
It's Nyla's line.
I think it's Nyla.
Could you mute her, Andre?
I did. She's muted.
So to continue, so just to add on to what Nancy was saying, I mean, my sense is, one is that the not-for-profits are doing lots of thinking, the summer youth employment providers, about how what they can provide, remotely, semi-remotely, in person, and have a lot of capacity and interest. So even though the timing is, obviously going to be really tough, that the sooner that we know about the state funds, and then, I understand that we won't know about the city funds until the budget is adopted. But I think if we're, we should be ready to hit the road running when that happens.
So on the waiver, my understanding, and Anthony can check to see if we can share a copy of it with the youth board. There are basically three things we're asking for. One is instead of paying wages, since it's project-based learning in this remote learning model, we'll be paying stipends. The second is using the money to pay for the costs of the nonprofits, because historically, in the last few years at least, the TANF money went directly to wages for young people. And the third issue, which is the authority issue, is that we're asking them, we're going to be targeting young people who are high need, people who live in public housing, to waive the low income requirement, because it's supposed to be people who live at a certain level above the poverty level. And historically, the way the summer youth employment program worked is that when young people were selected in the lottery, May and June, when they were completing the enrollment process, they were asked to bring in documentation regarding their family income. And so when we had to allocate the state money, we know who that money would pay for, because we knew it would meet the low income criteria. Because every year the state, I want to say in the fall, maybe November, sends auditors, and they look at the files and the income of the people, young people who were paid for with the TANF dollars. So those are the three components. And so our plan is, because we don't think we'll serve 70,000 young people, even with this big shift of money from, well, not big, but the shift of money from NYPD to us. So we were thinking of targeting young people who are court involved, foster care, homeless, young people who live in the 15 public housing sites, and then if there was money left over, looking at young people from low-income zip codes that applied. And I think, and also the those that were part of the Career Ready program in public house in the public schools. So it's hard to plan when you don't know how much money you have. I mean, that's the reality of it. So we have, from what I heard, 3 different scenarios based on when we would know how much money we have. I think it's the 15th, the 22nd, and the 29th. And that would dictate how long the program would run. The sooner we learn, the earlier we could start. The later we learn, the later we can start, and it'd have to be a truncated program with more hours jammed in a shorter period of time. So literally, as I said in my city council testimony, we're flying the plane while building the plane, not just the engine, but building the entire plane. So if there are specific people who you think want to weigh in on this, let Anthony know, and he'll have Daphne reach out to them.
Bill, I have a question. In terms of being able to roll this out, the one of the biggest challenge SYEP is getting enough organizations and businesses to take young people. And given the kind of phasing in of places opening, how are we planning around that?
So the model is not a job model. It's project-based learning. So there's curriculum we develop, a work readiness curriculum that we're modifying for 14, 15-year-olds, and then a separate one for older youth, which will be a good chunk of the program. And then for older youth, they're going to be engaged in sort of a capstone project to address an issue that an employer presents to them. So we're working with our networks of employers that are still interested, and we hope, and this is the thing, and I tried desperately to avoid layoffs of staff in the summer youth employment programs, because many of the staff, the cut to SYP wasn't just in FY21, it took effect in FY20. And so despite my best efforts and my best ideas, I was trying to keep people, the nonprofit staff intact until June 30th. And then if there was an adopted budget, we would have an infrastructure that could move quickly. Because I know that if you have no infrastructure, it makes it much harder to execute in a short window. So I lost that battle. And so some nonprofits will have the infrastructure because they had other resources that they were able to shift around. Others may not. I mean, so I think it's going to be, we're going to obviously, once we have a budget, we're obviously going to reach out to everyone to see who can ramp up, and in a very short modified program. So it's more project-based learning. That's why we're paying a stipend as opposed to a wage, because to justify the wage requirements of the state labor department, it has to be a real job. It has to be a service, a product, something that when you're audited by the state labor department, they can say, oh yes, this is a job. So to give you an example of where on our federally funded programs, our anti-poverty programs and our workforce federally funded programs, we're doing remote census outreach, where young people are doing phone banking, texting to people in zip codes where there's under a low response rate. And so that's a job. That's like telemarketing. And so we're doing that, and we're paying them an actual wage. So it's not just a training, you listen to a course and you do things. It's more, I mean, what the model we're developing is kind of what the Department of Education did, but a lot more interactive.
Thank you, Commissioners. I'm sorry, Jackie. We just Anna's patiently waiting to jump in. I just want to put,
I have.
let's have this as the last question, and maybe what we can also do is populate the chat box with particular questions that we can follow in on, so then we can kind of jump to some of the discussion points. Thank you, Anna. Anna, you're on mute. We can't hear you.
Okay. Can you hear me?
Yes, Anna.
Okay, okay. First of all, Commissioner, happy to see that you're doing well. That's good news. Second, I just wanted to share with you that a good number of the legislators are on board in terms of some level of reinstatement of the budget. And in terms of the CVOs, a good number of them are just waiting for us to see what happens in terms of the budget. And if there's money, they have very creative ideas that they have shared on certain platforms, via, Facebook, blah, blah, blah. So I think that it's going to be challenging. That's a fact, especially when we're talking about the time frame we have for implementing all of this. But, let's hope for the best. That's all what I wanted to say.
Thank you so much, Anna. I know we have tons of other questions as this is kind of playing out live before our eyes. So I would encourage all of you either to post your questions in the chat, send them to us on email so we can, respond to those questions. I know it's changing every day. So thank you, Commissioner, for your report. And yes, we agree. We're glad you're healthier and feeling better and fighting the good fight. And there is, the devil is in the details.
Can I mention one announcement I forgot to mention? Some of the board members might know Suzanne Lin, who was the Deputy Commissioner for Community Development at DY City for a decade. She unfortunately passed away 2 weeks ago from a heart attack. And so, this is really a bad time for DYC, not only the budget level, but just Suzanne was someone who was well liked and a really passionate advocate for New Yorkers, and her passing was so sudden. So some of you might know her, and she passed away, I think, 2 Fridays ago.
I'm so sorry to hear that, and our condolences to her family and to the rest of the agency. Hard times. I mean, we are all here because we are deeply committed to young people and people of our city, right? And so these times really put forward the question of, as a youth board and a youth committee, how do these times necessitate a change to our agenda? I mean, we had put forward back in March, we were developing a plan to get youth members to be part of the board, thinking about stipending them, really trying to lift up and engage youth as part of this body. And so I really felt like it was important to not only do a temperature check personally, but a temperature check around, how we vision our work on the youth board moving forward, given kind of this context and the challenges that we face. So I guess that's really the question we'd like to move into. And I guess before I pose the question, I realized the thing I always forget to do is to do a vote on the meeting minutes. So hold that big, heavy question. And if you would, if I could get a motion to approve the meeting minutes. Anybody?
Has everyone had a chance to review them? Okay.
It looks like
So
Jeanette motions, Jackie seconds, all in favor?
Second.
Great, any abstentions? No, unanimous, fantastic, thank you, that was very efficient. Anthony, I did my job. Anthony's like, meeting minutes. Moving back, To that big heavy question, we'd love to hear from each of you, given this context, given this change, given the challenges, and given the opportunities where people in this city are rallying around youth services, rallying around education and the things that are critically important to us. What do you vision our agenda should be? Where should we be positioned? I think I heard some inklings of it in the opening, so I'd like to open the floor to everyone. And Nancy, we're going to jump in.
Yeah. Can you hear me? Yeah. You know what, Alexa? I mean, you just said it. Hundreds, if not thousands, of random protesters in the streets of New York City calling for more investment in youth services and social services. So I think we, as a youth board, I think we should resolve. I don't know what the protocol is or the governance, but I think we should pass a resolution that echoes that sentiment, that says youth services to young people beginning with this summer are essential, and that the city needs to recommit to its investment in services for young people. I don't know who we would send this resolution to, but I think we should come together and make a statement about that.
I would second that idea. I think we should, we're not very outward facing and haven't been. But I think it would be, one more contribution to confirm and to acknowledge what is happening and the importance of more investment in youth services.
I would also like to add that maybe we want to look at what kind of youth services we feel is really necessary at this time. And one of the things I would like to put on the table is the need for mental health, rather than just activities, but really incorporating support that is more emotional in terms of the kind of activity and intent at this time, as part of what we will put forth as needed social services for youth.
Okay, can you hear me? I think that is a good idea because it will complement all the services in the area of mental health. But I don't know, I think that there's a budget already for that. And the First Lady just announced some of the services that are being offered in terms of mental health. The governor also is offering, there's a list of professionals that are offering mental health free of charge. It's a good idea. But perhaps maybe some of the other activities could be remote kind of activities of working at some of those agencies that we usually work with. I know that there's an agency in Washington Heights that shared with me, because they learned that I'm a board member, that they have a very interesting proposal in terms of engaging our youth remotely to follow up on services and making phone calls, etc. I don't know. It's just an idea. Can you hear me?
Yes, we are doing.
Thank you, Anne. Jeanette, do you have any thoughts about the role of the board, challenges, opportunities that you feel like we should be leaning into at this time?
Yeah, I think that it goes along with everything that we've been talking about over the last several months before we went into quarantine, that we have a unique opportunity to be more active, more vocal, and engaged. How we elevate the youth voices within the decisions that are being made, how we landscape our individual talents and apply that to the work that needs to actually happen. I think it's really viable, and a solution that we can, still lift while we're all at home. I think, though, that we have to relook at what the priorities are, because the world has changed and we may not be able to get after all of those buckets of work. So perhaps now is the time to reevaluate, reprioritize, and get really sharp around the deliverables that we'd want to see. And if that means there's a phased approach, I think that that's fine. But inaction wouldn't sit well with me. Like, I don't want to come back 3 months from now like, oh, what can we do? I think that we have to be tactical around what we can do. Somebody said something to me today that really resonates in some of the strategic thinking. It was like, hey, what happens in like the first 12 minutes versus 12 days versus 12 months? And it was just really sharp as far as like, hey, making a decision of like, it's okay, we don't know what we're going to do, but we're going to make a decision that we have to do. Developing a plan within that 12 days, and then use those 12 months to actually see how it executes. So that's what I just want to hope for, like action. I don't want to just have another board meeting in 3 months saying we want to do something.
It seems like there's a couple of things. There's the immediate kind of advocacy for the budget, right? So what could we do? Is it a statement that goes to both the mayor, the comptroller's office, other representatives from us, and it's something that's public facing as well? Am I echoing? I'm sorry. No, okay. And then are there what would be another step that we could do in terms of supporting right now? Because it seems like conversations about the budget is happening as we're talking right now. So what can we do for that? And then in terms of summer and things of youth support of community, I'm not sure what that next step would be, but is there, I'm not sure, but I'm wondering if there's something we can do that would provide a space for some of those programs that aren't as active right now, or find a platform to support them in some way so that they're not disappearing. I don't know. I don't know. It's really big and overwhelming, but I'm stabbing in the dark, seeing if we hit something.
So off of this, because I think that's accurate, right? We just don't know. We want to do something. I think we have to have an honest conversation about like, what can we actually influence, right? And tackle it that way. What can we influence? Because budget conversations are happening, but like the commissioner said, he's like, oh, I wasn't consulted, I was told. So what can we actually do where we can actually influence a conversation? And if budget isn't one of them, then we can't devote energy there, because we can't influence it. We're not going to change it. If it is, and we have, even if there's a little crack we could get through, then yes, and we can build a plan against it. But if it's really like you're not going to be able to influence, you're not going to be able to impact those decisions or those conversations, then we need to redirect our energy.
Well, I think that's a really good point, Jeanette. Bill, do you have any comment on that?
At this point, I think the budget process in some ways is on its own path. It's really between the speaker and the mayor. And I think the question is how much money gets restored. Not whether, but how much. I mean, I know some advocates have called for $1 billion of a cut in the police department budget. I don't think that's going to happen. Ben Tucker testified today before the city council and says the police department will oppose it. The mayor says he will oppose $1 billion. So And then I'm not sure, there's also a push to get restoration of cuts to the Department of Education. So how much money will be available, will be freed up by a cut in the police department budget? And is it just DYCD, or is the Department of Education going to get a certain amount of that? Because they took a big cut to their fair share funding, which goes directly into schools. So there are a lot of moving parts here. So a general statement is a general statement. I think, quite frankly, what we're trying to do at DYCD is look at what's around the corner, because there's new energy among young people. How do we harness it? And so where Daryl and Denise are getting their staff to think about how do we plan a series of virtual town hall meetings over the next 18 months or 17 months and whatever days it is, where we can reach out to all the young people and all the different programs that we support and get them to, one, raise the issues that are resonating with them, and two, give them opportunity to organize, because we can connect young people across the city through a virtual town hall meeting. So, we're looking ahead, because if we do something now, I mean, if we try to do a virtual town hall meeting now, it'll be all around the budget. And at this point, it's between two men. It's between the speaker and the mayor. I think, if people want to make a statement of principle, that's fine. But I think let's look beyond the budget and how do we harness this energy out there and help young people build organizations, because to sustain this movement, not just in New York City, but nationally, it's going to be young people that are going to be doing it, and with the help of adults. But I think, we need to figure out how we can be supportive of what they want to do in the future.
This is Tom. So, one of the things that I was thinking about is this group in New York called CARA, which was involved in creating a program where they trained students in a campus from different schools to work with their peers around college applications, doing FAFSA, all of that. And, they're very effective as peer-to-peer counselors and supports. So I wonder if the strategy could be to have DYCD in the next year work on developing training curriculum for staff that could work with the young people in their centers around how they can become stronger leaders and, around some of these issues. You may already have some of this program, but that's part of what I'm thinking. How could we do kind of what you're saying in an orchestrated way to support young people to be even better and more effective in bringing around social change?
One of the things we focused on for the last 6 years was really incorporating civic engagement in all our programs, because whether it's middle school, high school, community center. So I think that's a big part of the culture shift we've already done. You should certainly reach out to Daryl and share with him your ideas about this. The thing that worries me the most is that young people may be moving past us, that we may be, the energy is out there, and they may move on to other things that, in some ways, government is rushing to catch up where young people are at this point. Because I think the fact that this is the 13th day of protests, I don't think any of us thought this would go this long and this far and this big, because quite frankly, those of us who are old get cynical. We see these things come and go, and they flare up, and then they die. I really do think this is a inflection point for the country. So I'm, as somebody who was an activist, I'm kind of frustrated that, damn, they're rushing ahead of us. I don't have a sense of what are the things we can do to channel this energy to make positive, sustained social change.
That to me would speak to the need to actually get some young people in the room here right now to tell us that then.
Reggie, thank you. You took the words right out of my mouth. Yeah, I appreciate that. And that is, I feel like, the perpetual state of things. Young people, communities are always way ahead. in their analysis experience and understanding of what needs to get done. And often the professional world, governments, philanthropy sectors are way behind trying to catch up. We just don't seem to listen very often. I think we should double in our commitment to getting young voices in the room and continue to move forward with that. I think the young people are telling us the budget fight is not over, so I would encourage you all in capacities to continue to send those emails, to follow the lead of young people, because like, as we know, the decisions aren't made until the decisions are made, and even then, they may not look anything like what we need and what we're demanding. So the pressure needs to be sustained, and we need to be incredibly vigilant, both individually and as a board. It sounds like we want to move forward with some collective statement around the importance of youth services and funding for youth. So it sounds like we have some good action steps to take. So we are at.
So wait, Alexa. So I want to raise, and then Andre just mentioned this in the chat as well. I think everyone here remembers the young people from the My Brother Sisters Keeper Youth Council that spoke to the board in December, and that was the reason why they spoke was because we and all of you wanted to have more youth voice. So I know there was a recent internal executive team call where Darryl had mentioned that the My Brother Sisters Keeper Youth Council, some of those young people are trying to figure out how to activate at this time on a larger platform. So, I mean, we could go back and find out what they're up to. I think since many of you heard from those young people in December, you'd probably be interested in hearing what they're thinking about doing at this time. We also are slowly learning and just hearing from our providers how they themselves are working with young people at this time. And there are some young people we know from some of our programs we fund, they've been out in the streets protesting, documenting it, and they're probably also trying to figure out what are their next steps. So I think one thing that we could commit to is just going back and just continuing to find out what our programs are doing, what they're doing directly with young people. We talked about this the other day internally as well, that we want to elevate those stories on our social media, right? And that's to the commissioner's point earlier, that definitely if any of you are hearing, seeing in your communities and your networks of young people taking action at this time, we want to celebrate that and promote that, because I think it's very powerful for young people to see other young people taking action. And that's how you keep this going. And that's how we build the next generation of leaders that are going to change this country for the better.
The commissioner says, we probably can't change the direction of the budget, but I think we need to have a public statement that we could send to the mayor, we could send to the speaker, we could send to the public advocate, we could send to the controller, letting them know that we do support directing some of that, more of that police money or fire money or some other money to our agency. I think we need to have a public statement, even if it doesn't go anywhere else. I think we have to have something that hits the wall from our group.
Great. I think we've landed on some consensus of action steps. Thank you so much, Anthony, for reminding us about those young people we engaged. So it sounds like a next step is formulating some kind of statement, engaging with the young people, hearing from them. And so perhaps we'll have a programs committee, a smaller meeting, since our meetings are generally quarterly, to report back. Yep. What's happening? Boxes are moving on the screen. It's like, where am I?
Alexa, I'm happy to work with you and others on a statement, if that's helpful.
and it should be soon, obviously short. But I do think we never know how many times the speaker or the mayor's office hears, and whether that is a little bit changes the tipping point a little bit. You never know, and no harm. So
Okay.
Okay, so I'll be following up with you all, and also we will be having conversations and determining next steps with young people. I think amplifying their voices and their stories, I think as honestly the agency is curating that and you have those voices and stories, it would be great for all of us to continue to put that out into our own networks, because this is really important to us, and I think we all agree.
And I think when we have more details on the virtual youth town hall that we want to organize, we'll definitely want to work with all of you to get the word out on that. I think, Nyla, were you saying something? Yeah. But yeah, when we have information about that, we can definitely want to work with all of you to help promote that and get young people to participate.
Great. So I think with that, I just want to really truly thank you for the time, your commitment, for everything, and spending all this time with us, taking extra time. My condolences again to your families. My love to your families. Stay safe and stay healthy, and let's continue to fight for our city.
Amen.
Take care, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Everybody.
Everyone, thank you.